A startling decision about Gilligan's Island was taken by CBS in 1967. One incident was excessive. It featured acts of cruelty and human sacrifice that no child should ever see. The chief of the tribe desired to toss a person into a volcano. Even worse, parents freaked out when the program came on. The network was overloaded with calls. The episode was pulled and prohibited from airing again. Today, we're revealing the sinister truth that the founders of Gilligan's Island hoped you would never learn about. Simple but daring was Sherwood Schwartz's notion. A show featuring 7 individuals stuck on an island with no way out was what he had in mind. They had no choice but to live together, they couldn't flee or give up. In contrast to traditional survival tales like Robinson Crusoe, which centered on a single individual fighting against nature, Schwartz aimed to investigate interpersonal connections. He pictured a collection of individuals from all walks of life, each of whom stood for a distinct aspect of American culture. Mr. Howell and his spouse, Lovey, were members of the wealthy elite, accustomed to luxury and power, yet they were utterly powerless on the island. In an environment where celebrity was irrelevant, Ginger embodied the beauty and confidence of Hollywood elegance. Marianne was a hardworking, sensible, and wholesome Midwesterner. The captain and Gilligan were both members of the working class. The skipper was seasoned but frequently irritated, while Gilligan was youthful and awkward. Despite being logical, resourceful, and intelligent, the professor was unable to discover a route home. This combination of characters, in Schwartz's opinion, would produce a special dynamic. His goal was to investigate democracy from the ground up. Without resources, social standing, or outside assistance, the characters had to rely on one another to get by. It was difficult to get the show on the air, though. The notion was not understood by the viewers, according to CBS management. They were concerned that too much explanation was required. Schwartz then had a breakthrough concept that revolutionized the field. He would describe the entire plot with a theme song rather than a lengthy prelude. The song needed to be memorable, straightforward, and catchy. It had to build the mood for the program, introduce all 7 characters, and describe how they became stranded in less than a minute. It succeeded. When Gilligan's Island debuted on September 26, 1964, viewers were fully aware of what they were witnessing. The show gained popularity very fast, although many people were unaware of its deeper meaning than only comedy. America underwent significant transition in the 1960s. There were cultural changes, socioeconomic conflicts, and civil rights movements worldwide. Though it may have appeared to be light entertainment, Gilligan's Island actually addressed serious social issues. It demonstrated how people with diverse backgrounds could work together, disagree, and develop surprising friendships. It also turned conventional power systems on their head. It didn't matter how wealthy Mr. Howell was. Gilligan's errors were a continual challenge to the skipper's leadership. The professor was unable to alter their fate, but he could construct nearly anything. There was more to the show's historical relevance. Marooned, the pilot episode, was shot in Hawaii at the end of 1963. When word leaked out that President John F. Kennedy had been shot in Dallas on November 22, the actors and crew were filming sequences at Moloa Bay. Initially, many believed it to be a mere rumor. There was little communication between them and the mainland, thousands of miles away. But as more information became available, the reality sank in. Kennedy was no more. Filming had to go on despite the abrupt change in the atmosphere on set. The following day, there was yet another challenge. Harbor in Honolulu was closed throughout the period of national grief, where important scenes were scheduled. After the formal day of mourning on November 25, Schwartz needed special authorization to resume filming. As a subliminal reminder of the tragedy that occurred during the production of the performance, flags flying at half-mast are visible in the background of certain moments. At night, the actors and staff would congregate in hotel lobby areas to watch the news. They watched live on TV as Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald. The entire nation was in grief. In the meantime, a comedy about castaways was being filmed. The disparity was astonishing. However, Schwartz thought that individuals needed a way out when things were uncertain. He had a strong desire to complete the task at hand. Even the theme tune had a convoluted journey before it became the well-known version. In order to create a tropical calypso song, Schwartz initially enlisted John Williams, who would go on to compose music for Star Wars. However, it didn't feel natural. Additionally, the lyrics were different. It was stated that the shipwreck was a 6-hour ride rather than a 3-hour tour. Rather from being farm girls and Hollywood stars, Marianne and Ginger were merely secretaries. The song needs to be changed, Schwartz knew. He collaborated with composer George Weil to produce a more straightforward piece. He was looking for a natural-sounding, sing-along friendly sea shanty style. The outcome was Gilligan's Isle, a song that rose to fame as much as the television program. Following the first season, one last modification occurred. Originally, the final two castaways were referred to as the rest in the lyrics. That didn't sit well with Gilligan's actor, Bob Denver. He insisted on the inclusion of Dawn Wells, Mary Ann, and Russell Johnson, the professor, in the song. Denver even said that if the modification wasn't done, his name will be taken out of the credits. CBS gave in. Mary Ann and the professor were formally included in the lyrics by season 2. Gilligan's Island's casting took many unexpected turns. It was time-consuming to find the correct actors. And not everyone thought the show had potential. The part of Gilligan was initially given to comedian Jerry Van Dyke, who was well known for his witty remarks. He rejected the script right away after reading it. According to him, it was the worst thing he had ever read. He feared that portraying such a ridiculous character would destroy his career. Rather, he decided to play the lead in My Mother the Car, a sitcom in which a man's talking car was inhabited by the soul of his deceased mother. Despite the show's failure, Van Dyke never felt bad about his decision. His refusal made room for Bob Denver, who was already well known for his role as Maynard G. Krebs on Dobie Gillis's numerous loves from 1959 and 1963. Denver was a gifted physical comedian. He was capable of fumbling, tripping, and falling through a scene while making it appear entirely realistic. He was a fantastic fit for Gilligan because of that expertise. Denver worked as a teacher and attended Loyola University to study political science before becoming an actor. He had never intended to pursue acting, but after he landed the Gilligan role, he rose to prominence on television. Just as difficult was finding the proper person for the skipper. Sherwood Schwartz, the creator of the program, sought a character who could be both kind and tough. The skipper had to have a soft side in addition to being large and commanding. That was exactly what Alan Hale Jr. was. In order to evaluate actors for the part, Schwartz devised a special audition sequence. In order to be lovable, they had to portray a dislikable character. Hale did a fantastic job. His authority and attractiveness were well balanced. Hale was initially spotted by Schwartz at a restaurant. He had a boisterous, upbeat demeanor. He had a natural presence, which was evidently what the skipper required. Hale's passion for the part was so great that he carried it over into his own life. Alan Hale's Lobster Barrel is a seafood restaurant that he started in Los Angeles in the 1970s. Like he did with Gilligan, he wore his captain's hat to meet customers and dubbed them Little Buddies. In the 1980s, Hale continued to be associated with his role even after the restaurant shuttered. Later on, he assisted customers in booking sightseeing cruises through a travel agency. After so many years of playing a ship captain, it was an appropriate position. Ginger Grant, played by Tina Louise, had a completely different experience. She wasn't sure she wanted to take the part at first. Gilligan's Island was brought up to her while she was acting alongside Carol Burnett in a play in 1964. She only consented to join since she believed it would only be temporary. She discovered that the show did not live up to her expectations once production began. Louise wanted a different Ginger than the snarky, sharp-tongued persona that was originally written. She favored a more feminine, glitzy representation, a la Jane Mansfield or Marilyn Monroe. Her greatest annoyance was when she discovered that Gilligan's Island was an ensemble production, of which she had anticipated being the star. On set, this caused stress. She avoided interacting with the other actors a lot. Conflict arose, especially with Bob Denver. It was rumored that he had spoken negatively about her. And their bond never came back. Refused to participate in reunion movies after the show's finale. She spent many years away from Gilligan's Island. Her recognition of its significance and its place in television history came much later. Lovey Howell's actress, Natalie Schafer, has a secret of her own. In 1900, she was born. But on official records, she frequently declared 1912. She was already 64 by the time the pilot for the show was shot in 1963. Her contract had a unique condition to maintain her youthful appearance. She wouldn't have any close-ups, and she wouldn't have to do physically taxing parts. Schafer was first uninterested in the position. She only agreed to do the pilot because she thought it would be a free vacation since it was being filmed in Hawaii. The show, she was certain, would never survive. She gave her character her whole attention when Gilligan's Island became popular. She benefited from not doing slapstick humor. Lovey Howell stood out as the sophisticated, elegant socialite, which heightened the humor of the program. When Gilligan's Island debuted on September 26, 1964, nobody anticipated that it would become a huge sensation. Although the play was written off as ridiculous by critics, viewers saw something else because to Sherwood Schwartz. With a score of 24.7, the first season came in at number 18 in the Nielsen ratings. Every week, almost 13 million homes tuned in. Even one of the most popular TV series at the time, Bonanza, was surpassed by it. The key to its success was straightforward. In the greatest way possible, it was humorous, lighthearted, and utterly absurd. People wanted to get away from the chaotic 1960s. They got that from Gilligan's Island. Despite their best efforts, the castaways were never able to escape the island. The outrageous scenarios and slapstick humor kept the audience entertained. It was a huge hit with families, and children in particular were enamored. Despite CBS moving the time slot, the ratings remained high. With a Nielsen score of 22.1 and a 22nd ranking, the show was still in the top 25 by season 2. There was no stopping it. The series, however, was abruptly cancelled in 1967. Ratings were unrelated to the cause. Gunsmoke required CBS to make room, therefore Gilligan's Island was cancelled. It should have ended there, but it didn't. Gilligan's Island rose to become one of the most syndicated television programs ever. Every year after it was cancelled, repeats were broadcast everywhere, reaching new generations. Even children who were not born in the 1960s grew up with it. The joke was straightforward. The characters were over the top. And the physical humor made it simple to appreciate. While the Dick Van Dyke program focused on clever conversation, Gilligan's Island was all about huge, goofy moments. Gilligan's awkward errors, bizarre dream sequences, and unfeasible rescue attempts made him a household name. The show was never intended to be profound or somber. It was designed to elicit laughter, and it succeeded in doing so. On the other hand, Gilligan the Goddess, one of the most contentious episodes of Gilligan's Island, was broadcast on April 17, 1967. A troubling plot involving human sacrifice was established. Arriving on the island in search of a white goddess to toss into a volcano is King Kilwani, a tribal chief. Mrs. Howell, Mary Ann, and Ginger first view this as an opportunity to flee. They fear they could be removed from the island by the chief if they are selected. However, the castaways become fearful as they discover the truth. The males devise a foolish plot to protect the women. By dressing like women, they attempt to deceive the chief into selecting one of them. Ultimately, Gilligan is chosen and made to become Gilliana. An even stranger turn of events occurs when King Kilwani decides against it. Rather than sacrificing Gilliana, he chooses to wed her. Gilligan is in danger, so the other castaways rush to his aid. Nothing works, despite their attempts at everything from stupid dances to magic illusions. Eventually, Gilligan makes his own getaway. When the chief discovers the abandoned wig and clothes, he becomes alarmed because he forgot his disguise. He and his fighters run away in fear, thinking that a spirit has captured Gilliana. The situation wasn't well received by everyone, even if the program was meant to make people chuckle. Negative preconceptions were strengthened when indigenous people were portrayed as violent and superstitious. There were issues with the usage of cross-dressing for comedic effect as well. It was one of those Gilligan's Island episodes where the hilarity was interwoven with issues that, on the surface, seemed unpleasant. Forward March, another contentious episode, aired on February 17, 1966. In addition to showing a gorilla hurling explosives, this one also made reference to nuclear war. When they discover that someone is attacking them from the bushes, the castaways start to panic. The person behind the grenades is unknown, and they drop perilously near. Without hesitation, Mr. Howell assumes command, establishing a crude military organization and appointing himself General Howell. When the party finally finds the adversary, it's a surprise to everyone who has been preparing for combat. In a nearby cave, a gorilla has discovered and is using discarded World War II weapons. The professor develops a hypothesis. He thinks the gorilla must have mastered the art of throwing grenades by observing warriors from past decades. After that, Gilligan is able to teach the gorilla to toss the bombs into the lagoon rather than the castaways. When the gorilla throws an odd red disc, the situation takes an unexpected turn, even though it seems to be resolved. When it reaches the ground, it bursts into a massive cloud of mushrooms. There is an obvious allusion to nuclear bombs in the picture. During the Cold War, this was a delicate subject. The show concludes with a quintessential slapstick sequence. The gorilla hits Gilligan in the face with a pie just as everything is calming down. Despite its intended lightheartedness, the story was criticized. For some, it reduced nuclear threats and conflict to farce. Even back then, the notion of a gorilla brandishing a grenade was considered ridiculous. It did, however, also demonstrate how Gilligan's Island frequently tended to disregard the deeper connotations of its outrageous, exaggerated plots. With its tense sexual scenes, Gilligan's Island also pushed boundaries during its 1964 to 1967 run. Tina Louise's character Ginger Grant frequently utilized her charm to control circumstances. She charmed her way out of issues and did sensual dances. While some viewers thought these scenes were amusing, others thought they were too provocative for family television. She employed sexy techniques to divert Islanders in shows like Slave Girl. Dawn Wells's portrayal of Marianne Summers was more wholesome, but she did have some controversial moments. Her attire was regarded as risky at the time, particularly her short shorts. For some, they went beyond what was considered appropriate on TV. In order to achieve her goals, Marianne occasionally exaggerated her love appeal. As a result, she and Ginger developed an intriguing relationship. One of the things that made the show appealing was the contrast between Marianne's understated charm and Ginger's audacious confidence. The question of whether these components were excessive for a sitcom was also raised by it. The March 20, 1967, episode of Slave Girl was one of the most unsettling. Gilligan prevents Kaylani, a native woman, from drowning in this tale. According to the customs of her culture, she commits herself to him as a lifelong slave. Tension is quickly produced by this. Although Gilligan feels bad, the other castaways don't appear to care. There are many who attempt to exploit Kalani's devotion. Some viewers, even in the 1960s, were astonished when Mr. Howell even proposed to combat Gilligan for her. After Kalani's suitor, Agundi, shows up on the island, things get heated. To reclaim Kalani, he challenges Gilligan to a duel. The professor uses a curare serum to pretend Gilligan is dead in an attempt to end the fight. It goes horribly wrong though. According to Kalani's tribe, Gilligan has passed away and gets set to cremate him over a huge fire. When he awakens, he leaps up in fright upon seeing the flames. His unexpected resuscitation leads the tribe to believe he is a fire deity. They abandon the castaways once more as they escape the island in terror. Even with its humorous parts, Slave Girl received a lot of negative feedback. The concept of human ownership was unnerving, and the episode's treatment of native traditions came across as disrespectful and out of date. Even by 1960s standards, it was unpleasant. Negative prejudices were strengthened by the inflated depiction of Kalani's tribe as unsophisticated and superstitious. Another instance of Gilligan's Island occasionally straying into unsuitable terrain was this one. On Gilligan's Island, Tina Louise portrayed the glitzy movie star Ginger Grant. On set, however, she never felt comfortable. She remained quiet while the other actors chatted around in between takes. She was surprised to learn that the show was an ensemble cast, as she had assumed Ginger would be the star. Rather than being the main character, she was one of 7. She was never free of that disappointment. She developed an odd friendship with Bob Denver, who played Gilligan. Denver allegedly informed friends Louise was smuggling her boyfriend into her dressing room, according to rumors. She was upset at that. Furthermore, Denver declined to engage with her off-camera or for photos, as reported by TV Guide reporters. Their problems were never discussed in public by him. It was simpler to ignore someone's issues, he subsequently claimed. Louise had no desire to be involved with the show after it stopped in 1967. She declined invitations to play Ginger again and to appear in the reunion films. Although the character was recast, the original was never forgotten by admirers. Louise's opinion altered over time. In the end, she agreed that the performance had made people happy and that its influence had lasted. Fans for years thought Tina Louise and Dawn Wells, who portrayed Marianne, were in competition with one another. The argument between Ginger and Marianne went down in history. Whereas Marianne was kind and grounded, Ginger was glitzy and refined. Assuming the actresses must have taken sides, viewers took sides. Both denied a genuine feud ever existed. Wells thought Louise had been misinformed about her position. She probably assumed she would be the main attraction, only to discover that attention was divided. Out of the 7 castaways, Louise may have stayed away because of the miscommunication. She was professional, but not very amiable, according to Wells. Although they were not close, there was no animosity. Louise's character had a higher pay and billing, in contrast to what fans believed. Wells only received $750 every week, whilst she received $1,500 per episode. Wells did, however, receive more fan mail letters. Because they found Marian more sympathetic, viewers were able to relate to her. The perception of rivalry between them might have been fueled by that disparity in popularity. Over the next few years, both actresses learned to value their time on the show. It was always well received by Wells, and Louise gradually realized its significance in the history of television. The purported competition was just another myth from Hollywood. Even though Gilligan's Island was a huge success, the actors never really benefited financially. Although it ran from 1964 to 1967, the show's true popularity was in syndication. One of the most well-known sitcoms ever, millions of people watched repeats. Sherwood Schwartz, the producer, reportedly earned $90 million only from syndication. The cast didn't do anything. Salary levels were low throughout the first run. The weekly salary of Dawn Wells was only $750, whereas Tina Louise received $1,500 every episode. Today, when adjusted for inflation, that would be about $7,500. This was in stark contrast to later sitcom stars like the Friends group, who earned $1 million per episode. It was their contracts that were the issue. There was no standard for residuals at the time. Any rights to future revenues were signed away by the cast. There was nothing they could do once the show became a syndication success. One of Wells' greatest regrets, she subsequently acknowledged, was not being able to get residuals. There were financial disagreements even behind the scenes. Sherwood Schwartz was sued by his brother, Elroy Schwartz, for compensation for writing for the pilot. The broader problem of unequal pay in television was brought to light by the case. The cast also had to contend with stringent censorship regulations, as if financial difficulties weren't enough. CBS had strict rules about what could be broadcast on television, and they were particularly watchful of Tina Louise and Dawn Wells' attire. Although Marianne's hallmark style consisted of knotted crop tops and short shorts, CBS requested that her belly button always be covered. Her shorts were lifted higher by costume designers in order to comply. The plunging necklines of Ginger's gowns were common, but censors required adjustments or cautious camera angles to prevent excessive skin exposure. The whole thing seemed absurd to Sherwood Schwartz. Once, he made a joke about how he couldn't go a day without hearing people moan about Marianne's navel and Tina's tits. The wardrobe crew managed to get around the limitations. How to cover her stomach in situations in a subtle way. The high-waisted shorts that Wells wore became a classic. It was obvious that the double standard was in place. Male performers did not have the same problems as CBS, which was fixated on Louise and Wells' attire. While Gilligan's Island had more stringent regulations for its female performers, William Shatner was able to flaunt his abs on Star Trek at the same time. Gilligan's Island was scheduled to return for a fourth season in 1967. CBS had given the actors and staff assurances that the show was secure. Some actors believed they had job security, so they even purchased homes close to the location. However, everything changed just as production was ready to start. CBS abruptly canceled the program. It wasn't due of low viewership or disinterest. The reason for this was that Gunsmoke required a new time slot. Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. were when Gilligan's Island aired at the time. Despite not ranking in the top 30, the show was nonetheless outperforming and surviving NBC's The Monkees. Gunsmoke had been having trouble in the ratings in the meanwhile. After 12 seasons, the Saturday night time slot was no longer functional. With the belief that its run was ended, CBS had decided to cancel it. However, the head of the network, William S. Paley, had different ideas. Paley has been a Gunsmoke fan for years. It wasn't merely another show to him. It was a representation of CBS's prosperity. Babe Paley, his wife, also adored it. And she wasn't pleased to learn that it might be cancelled. Paley concluded that Gunsmoke must remain. It was difficult to locate a spot in the schedule. CBS executives frantically tried to find a solution. They decided to move Gunsmoke to Monday nights at the last minute. Gilligan's Island and Doc, another new show, were axed to make way. Gilligan's Island creator Sherwood Schwartz was completely taken aback by this. The program had previously received a renewal. It had vanished. For the cast, the cancellation was devastating. After being assured of another season, they were abruptly laid off. However, Gilligan's Island was not overlooked. It entered syndication and gained unprecedented popularity. Because of reruns, it survived and became a cult favorite. It developed into one of the most popular TV series ever to be syndicated, resulting in animated sequels and reunion films. Gunsmoke, meanwhile, flourished in its new Monday night schedule. It was a better move than CBS had anticipated. As ratings increased, it spent 6 consecutive years in the top 10. After airing for 20 years, Gunsmoke ended in 1975 after continuing for an additional 8 seasons instead of concluding in 1967. Paley had a personal reason for saving Gunsmoke. It was not numerically based. Audiences' desires were not the basis for it. It has to do with preserving his favorite program. Another factor was the influence of his wife. According to reports, she put pressure on him to ensure that Gunsmoke continued to air. CBS's last-minute schedule modification was made even more urgent by that. Gilligan's Island's demise turned out to be one of the most unexpected events in television history. After being promised a second season, a show vanished without warning. Suddenly, a faltering series was given a further 8 years of life. The castaways' escape from the island was never shown to fans, at least not until the subsequent television films. Ultimately, TV history was altered by the personal preference of one executive. One of the longest-running dramas ever, Gunsmoke, came at the expense of another program that may have lasted for many more years. In television, it served as a reminder that artistic achievement wasn't always important. The individuals in power ultimately made the final choice.